and in this tutorial we'll be looking at how to make a smart remote in Solidworks. So you'll need to open up a new part and then go to the right plane, and we're going to start sketching on that plane. So we're going to start with the ellipse tool. So to add the ellipse, we're going to add it just to the middle and then drag it out, click once and then click again to change the size of the ellipse. And then we're going to use our smart dimension just to add some dimensions to this to make sure that we know the size of the shape. Now just for illustration purposes, I'm going to make this 30 and then across, and I'll make that 105. It's just nice to use nice round numbers if we can, and because we're just doing this as an illustration, we can do that. And then we're going to do features and extrude back. Now again, if you want to quickly change the views of how you're looking at something, you can press the space bar, which then gives you lots of options on changing the camera angles. It's a nice quick way of doing it. So I've extruded that. It doesn't matter too much what sort of size you extrude it to, but you just need to extrude it backwards. We can always change that later on. Then we go to the top plane and geometry. So we're going to add a new plane. We're going to add a plane above the surface, and we're going to use that to then cut down into the remote to add the buttons. Now what we'll do is we'll add a few reference points. Now those reference points are really useful because it allows us to add those buttons in corresponding spots, and because we can use the dimension tool, it means that we will be able to add them in the right places that we're happy with. So I've got the center line, and then I've done another line about a quarter of the way across the remote, and then I draw a circle just in the middle of that, and that's just the kind of top navigation buttons that you'd normally find on a smart remote. And then another reference point just a bit further down to add the next buttons that we'll add. And then select the 2 points that we want the distance to be between, and then 50, and then select another point and then the centre of the circle, so that I can choose how far away they are from that. So do that about 70 just to give a bit of space between the buttons. And then I'm going to add a circle along that point there, and then because we've got a line down the middle, we can then use that as our reference. So just making that, so if I pull that to the left, you can see that I can choose how far away it is from that line. And then what we can do is we can do mirror, and because we've got a center line, we can select the circle and then select the center line, and it will mirror it for us so that it's in the exact same position. It's nice and quick, much easier than just redrawing it, so it's a nice quick efficient way of doing it. Then we go to features, we do the cut extrude, and then you need to select the contours around the edge. Once you select them, you don't want it to go all the way through the product, because then you're just going to end up with a hole the way through. You want it to go through so that it just goes onto the surface. So not too far through there. As you can see with the yellow parts, you can see how far into the product they're going. And then when we green tick, you can see that the second remote buttons haven't gone all the way through, so we can just right click and do edit feature, and then we can just pull that down a little bit further. You want to make sure that it cuts complete circles into the shape, otherwise it's going to make the next step a little bit more difficult. And then we have just the basic part there, and you can right click on that plane, and then you can hide it by clicking on the eye, and that just hides it from view, just makes it a bit easier. Then not quite happy with the sizing of that extrude, so just make it a little bit bigger. Like I said, you can always change this as we go. Green tick just so that we're happy with that. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to use surfaces. So if you haven't got surfaces on, right click on the tab and then make sure surfaces are ticked. Then we want to go to the one that says filled surface. Now filled surface basically fills a surface around a certain boundary. So if we select the circle, take a few seconds to load, and you can see it's got that yellow tinge, and that shows us where it's going to fill in the shape. So it's a very quick, easy way just to fill in these circles. So again, click the circle and then green tick. Now it's not a great idea to try and do more than one at a time, as you can see, so what I would recommend you do is one at a time. Otherwise it tries to fill the two surfaces together, so do one at a time and then just a green tick. And green tick again. So then we've got the next stage complete. So you can see that it's kind of filling in where those buttons are. and then just go to the front, and then we're going to sketch on the front. We're just going to add a rectangle shape. Now this is for the infrared reader that would normally interact with your devices, and then we're just going to add that on there, and we'll do the same again with an extrude cut. So just choosing the dimensions that we want to use, and then set that to 35 and 6 just for the height. Now again, like we did before, we can go into features, and then we're going to do the extrude cut and change that just to a very small amount, something like 1mm would be ideal. And then we can also go back to surfaces and do our filled surface. Now with this you'll need to select all the edges, so not just one part of it, so go all the way around and select all the edges. Once you've done that, you see you get that kind of yellowy tinge again to show that it's being filled in. Okay, so what we can do is we can now see that we've started getting those buttons in the right place, and we've got our infrared on the front. So far quite happy with the sizing of it all. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to have a look at making these thick basically. So if we choose thicken and then select the part that we want to thicken, you can then choose whether you want it to thicken inside, outside, both, etc. And if you try to thicken it inside, you'll see that an error comes up. So we need to actually change it so that it thickens it going outwards. It doesn't like to thicken inwards because it's just going to collide with itself. So what we do is we actually do surface thicken, and you want to choose the left option, so the far left option, and that will thicken it outwards. So you'll see you get it raised ever so slightly, which gives it a more realistic look of a button anyway, which is exactly what we want to look for. So we can change that thicken to something quite a small amount if we don't want to thicken quite that much, because 1mm looks quite a lot. So you can actually just thicken it by 0.1, so it still gives it a slight raised surface, but it's only a small amount, and then we can thicken the others as well. Now with some of them, when you're thickening, you might get an error that comes up. Part of that is just the way that it's trying to thicken it. So what we'll do is we'll go back to our thicken, select the surface again, and then if we go into merge results and green tick, you can see that it won't merge the results, but it will still thicken it. So the thicken still works and still gives us the same desired result. Next thing we want to do is we're just going to have a look at the top view, and we're going to go back to that plane we had before, so plane 1, and we're going to sketch on that one. So that's the plane that's above our design, and this is the one that we're going to then start drawing on to start adding extra details. So we had a circle that's smaller than the original circle. Now what we're going to do is we're going to extrude cut and fill these shapes again, so they need to be slightly smaller. So set this one to about 35, should be fine. And if we then sketch one of these lines out, you'll see these yellow lines appear, and those are to show that it references it properly and kind of keeps it in line. They normally lock to the different angles, like 90 degrees is one of the angles that it locks to show it. Now you can draw the lines like I'm showing you here, but there's a much quicker way, and I'll show you that now. So the much quicker way is actually if you go to where it says linear sketch, drop down and do the circular one. If you select the circle, so you want to go to the blue box, click in the middle, and that shows the point you want to rotate around, and then you want it to be 4, so we're going to show the pattern, so click on what you want to pattern and then set it to 360. That then shows you where the yellow lines are, where those lines are going to appear, so green tick, and you can see that they've been replaced with the black lines. So it's quite a nice quick way of drawing those kind of shapes out. And we can use that to reference where we want the extra buttons to go. So we're going to draw another circle on one of the black lines, and then to reference that and just add a dimension to it so we know how far away it is from the centre of the circle, so 25. Then go back to our circle pattern, so circular sketch pattern, select the centre again, and then entities to pattern, and then select the circle, and then green tick. So you can see that again that has put them all in the right place, corresponding to each other around the circle. So it's a nice quick way of getting those shapes into position and into place. Now what we want to have a look at is how we're going to add the next bits to these other buttons. So what we want to do is we're going to add the pause and play to the right button and menu to the left button. So what you can do is if you add text, it's going to basically add text to your work, but it needs to follow a line of some kind. So what we'll do is if we added a line, for example, like I'm doing here, you can see that we can actually get the text to go along that line. Now it's a good idea to make sure that you're referencing everything, just to make sure that you're putting it all in the right positions. If you don't put everything in the right positions, then your design won't look as nice, won't look as neat. So I'm going to add a reference point using the circle. So if I go to the circle, it then shows me the center point. Draw a circle outwards. So that's my reference point. So you're kind of copying parts from what we've drawn earlier so that we can then control that and then set that to 25, which is the size we used for the circles. I'm going to add a line across the middle as a nice reference point and then hit escape just to stop it drawing the next line. And then we can click on the A, which is the text tool. You can select the line, and then when you enter your text, you'll see that it appears following that line. Let's put that in the middle. And you can also see that you can flip the text around. You can also reverse it, and there's lots of other options that you can see me just demonstrating, just to show you how to do some of the different things. And then of course you can rotate it, etc. So there's lots of different options. And then green tick. And then exit the sketch. Now if we go to the right button, we're going to draw a circle around this one as a nice reference point again. So I went to the edge of the circle to show me where the middle is, and then I can draw it out to the centre. So we're trying to get these circles to the exact same size and in the same positions. And then using that reference point just to draw a line across. Now to make sure that these buttons are going to look nice, we're going to actually mirror them. So if we draw the first one, so just the top of the play button, that one's a little bit small, so I think what I'll do is just change that play button just so that it's going to be a little bit bigger. So just delete those two lines, make that one a little bit bigger. That's better. So again, that's just the top half of the lines, like so. Just click that one there. And then what we'll do is we'll add the other part, which is then the pause option from the play buttons. So just choose the height of that one. I think add a reference point just at the top there so that I know where the top of the shape is going to be, and then that way I can make sure that the rectangle meets that, just so they're in line with each other. And draw that one. Now once these are in position, we will be changing them with the dimensions tool, so just put them into place just for now. And then you can use the smart dimensions just to change the actual sizing of them. So we'll make that 2. Now if that moves like that, just push Ctrl Z, and what you can do is right click and then fix different parts of your work, and then that means that they won't move. So just right click and then click the anchor and it fixes them to place, which then means when I change the dimensions it has less areas for it to move, which means that you don't end up with it kind of jumping out the circle like mine did. And then make sure that the other one is 2 as well. And then I'll add a gap between the two parts just so that we know how far apart they are, so 0.5 should be fine. And then what we can do, we can remove the bottom part of those lines. So what I'm doing is I've created them and then I'm deleting the bottom halves. You don't have to do it like this, but it's just nice to show you how to mirror the whole thing in one go. And if you go to mirror, entities to mirror, so you want to select the shapes that you want to mirror first. So just clicking all the lines that we're going to mirror around. And then mirror about, and then choose the line you want to mirror. You can see the yellow lines to show where they're going to mirror. And then I'll just select that top line just for now to mirror. And then we can use our trim entities tool and we can start trimming them. Just make sure it's set to trim to closest, and then that way it will trim those lines just to the next point of another line that they intersect. and then you can see that it's gone blue, which means that it knows that they are a separate part. Okay, and then what you can do is select the circle and then do for construction, and then that way it knows that that is a construction line, which means that when you try to extrude, it won't try and extrude cut those lines. It will only try and extrude the bits that are solid shapes and not construction lines. So it's quite useful to be able to do that. And then just change some of these to construction as well. Just because what we're going to do is we can then extrude this all as one part. You can of course do these as separate features and do them as individual sketches, but just for this tutorial I'm just doing it in one part. And if you happen to accidentally make one of them a construction line, just click it again and untick the construction line box and it will stop it being a construction line. And then if we get to features, and then we can look at how we're going to cut that basically. So we'll exit the sketch, and then if we go to our extrude cut and then select the parts that you're going to cut, I'll change that one to construction line quickly as well. So extrude cut, select the circle, and then select the other smaller circles around it, because what we want to do is cut all them out, and then we're going to use a surface fill just to fill them in. I think I'll do the text after, so do that one for now. So you can see that it's cut through and it's given us those shapes. Now it has gone quite far through, so what we can do is we can always edit the feature and bring them up a little bit more so they don't go quite as far through, because they only need to just kind of touch on the surface just to give us that area to cut, because you obviously can't sketch onto curved surfaces, so this is a way of getting those details onto surfaces that are curved. And then filled surface, and we can work our way around and fill in all those boundaries that are currently empty. It's definitely a good idea to kind of do these one bit at a time. It takes longer, but it means that they will work properly. So it's just better to do it the right way first time rather than continuously getting the errors. Now just make sure that you fill in that circle in the middle as well, so again using your filled surface, and you can fill that in. And then we can go around the pause and play buttons. Now part of these, remember that you need to be able to select all of the outsides of these, don't just leave part of them because they won't fill properly. So you need to make sure that you select all the edges of the shape. And again just fill in that one as well. Now that they're all filled, we can then start thickening. Again with the thicken, best to have it so it thickens outwards and do one bit at a time. So just thicken one at a time. Okay, so now that we've got them all thickened, we can then go to our plane. I think will probably be best to do our text on a separate plane, so we'll do that as a separate cut. So if we draw a circle from the middle, just do it to the outside of our circle, so it's the same size. We'll draw the line in the middle again. And then do our text on there, so we'll add the text to the line, so select the line and then type the text, so we'll do the menu button and then the green tick. And then we'll change those lines to just construction lines, so it's just the text that's left, and then if we go to extrude cut, and then we can cut the text. Now again, don't want that to go all the way through, we only want it to go part way through. So if we set it to where we're happy with, maybe just a little bit more, just to make sure it all goes through. Now it will come up asking if you want selected bodies or all bodies. If you select one of the bodies, chances are when you push OK, you'll end up with what I get, which is where it's kind of cut out everything apart from kind of the centre of the E. So I've just deleted that and just going back to do it again. So we'll do extrude cut, make it go through, and then when we push the green tick, we'll make sure that it's going to select that surface. So we'll do all bodies this time. Push OK, and then you can see that it has cut all the way through there quite nicely. Now the next thing we'll need to do is we'll need to have a look at our surfaces and start doing our filled surfaces again. So if we go to filled surface, and then you'll need to select all of the edges, just being careful that you do select all of those edges. So some of the tops of the M's, for example, will have some flat edges, and I'll zoom in to show you them in a second, just to make sure that we select all of them. You know you haven't got the full surface selected when you don't get that kind of yellowy outline. So you can see that it won't do it unless it's all filled. So there's the top bit, and then the top of the right one as well. So once they're selected, you can see it gets that yellow, which means that it will fill that in. Now when you go around the letter E, you just need to be careful that you do select the whole of the E, because when you've gone part way round, it will let you fill it in, but what will happen is it will ignore the island part of the E. So if I show you that, so can you see that it's kind of ignoring that island bit, and you get this kind of funny texture look. So what I'll do is just undo that and delete that surface, just go to the surface, and then I'll just add it. I'll just add those outside bits, and then green tick. And what that does is it just means that it includes the island now, which gives it a much better look. And then again for the N, just select the whole of the N. Now I can imagine you guys kind of get the idea of that now. Okay, so I filled in all those shapes and just skipped ahead a little bit, just so that you don't have to watch me just filling in all those letters. And then what we can do is we can go to our Solidworks add-ins and add Photo View 360. And what we will do is if we go to the right side and you click on the blue, red, green and yellow kind of orb, you can then select appearances. Now we want to add different textures, and this is partly why we needed to cut out those buttons, is so that we can then select them as different parts. So you can just click and drag them onto the surface that you want them to go onto. So you just need to do this a little bit slower, because if you kind of rush off before selecting the actual part, then it won't actually connect to it properly. So let's just fillet these as well, just to give them that nice round edge as well. Just notice that, so change that to 2, just to give it a very small fillet there, just to curve it a little bit. And then I'll set this one to 2 as well. Right, let's have a look. So quite happy with those textures kind of on there. I'm going to make this a little bit longer just to see what that looks like. Yeah, a little bit better. It just gives it a little bit more of a similar look to a smart remote. And then we can go along and just add those textures. So if we then add different colours, it doesn't really matter too much how you want this to look. This is kind of where you can go a little bit individual, see what you want to add to it. Just add that to the thicken. And then if you go into the appearances, you can actually see what appearances are there, and you can actually push the red cross if you wanted to remove an appearance. And then drag that on there. And if you hover over the one that you think corresponds to the right one, so if you just want to do that face area, then you can do that. And then I'll add a slightly different one to the buttons. And I'll do that to, let's do that to the, we don't want to do the part, let's do it to the face. And then drag this one, add that on the face as well, add that on the face as well, add on the face. And then if we add a little bit more detail to the rest of our part, so we've got the menu and then we've got the pause play buttons, so let's add a bit of texture to them. Again, we just want to do it to the face, just showing you the different options. And then that one as well. And then we've got the menu. And if you do it to the part, you'd see that the entire part would become that colour, which we don't want. And then put that there, drag that on there. Just try to do all these the same kind of colour, just so that they look quite nice all together. Gives it a nice finish. And then I might add a slightly different gloss to it, just to make it look a little bit different. Make them stand out a bit more. So just remove that one. You can copy the appearances as well, so if you right click on them you can do copy, and then you can paste the appearance and then choose where to paste it, which is a little bit quicker than the kind of the dragging and dropping. So if you're using same sort of parts for each of them, don't forget that bit in the E as well, because that will come up, because that comes up as its own separate area. And then once we're happy, we can start putting into position and then deciding on how we're actually going to render this. And don't forget the infrared as well at the end of the remote. Okay, so if we go to render tools, if you go to options, I tend to actually change the final render to good, and then just green tick after that once I've got it into a position I'm happy with. And then I actually normally run a final render. I just find it easy just to do a final render. Don't need to do the survey right now. And then continue without camera perspective for now. And then what happened, it would load up, same as we've done with our other projects that we've looked at. You can then start rendering it. Now rather than me just talking over the render, I'm going to skip through the render a little bit, and then we can kind of see what the final result looks like once it's finished rendering. Okay, so that renders nice and quick. And then we can have a look at moving the angles a little bit. Once you get into a position that you're happy with and you're happy with the colours, that's when you can do your final render on the top quality, because that's what takes longer and that's what takes most of the time. So just keep testing it in different positions and just seeing if you're happy with how it's looking. And then again, because this is a short, it's the lower quality one, you can kind of get an idea of what it looks like, but it's not going to be final render quality. And that's when you go to your options. Don't need to change the preview render, we'll change the final render quality to maximum. And then this is where it takes a bit longer, so allow yourself plenty of time for this, and then do final render. Okay, so I've just skipped ahead a little bit there just to show you what the final render looks like, and then when you zoom in you should see that it's got a little bit more of a detail to it, and you can of course add more texture to this, you can change it, you can do your own things now. So this is where you can look at, actually, do you need to have more gloss, do you need to have less gloss on there, and then that's when you can try it in a final render and then save those pictures when you're happy with them. Now hopefully you found this tutorial helpful and you feel a little bit more confident with creating things in Solidworks.